Hello guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video, we're going to be exploring the Pythagorean Theorem, and I'll explain it to you in detail as we go. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so what is it? According to a legend, Pythagoras, a person, not a theorem, noticed the theorem while looking at the square tiles in the place of Samos, and it's a palace, and realized that diagonally dividing one of the squares created two right triangles. He then generalized the theorem to apply to right triangles with sides of unequal length. Pythagoras established a school in Croton, Italy, where new mathematical discoveries were attributed to him for centuries. This makes it difficult to know who first proved the theorem. And if you don't know what a right triangle is so far, I'll explain it to you in the next slide. But anyways, the Pythagorean theorem states that in any right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. And the wording might sound a little confusing, and you'll get it when we show it to you in equation form. So anyways, what is a right triangle? To know what a right triangle is, you need to know what a right angle is. So first of all, a right angle is an angle that measures 90 degrees. On a right triangle, the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. So basically, on a right triangle, there can only be one right angle, if you didn't know that. And basically, the side on the opposite of that one right angle, which is a square, is the hypotenuse, or C. C and hypotenuse are the same thing. So is triangle ABC right? It is a right triangle because it has one 90-degree angle, which is the square. The square is 90 degrees. So thus, it's a right triangle. So a right triangle has two legs, A and B, and a hypotenuse, which is C. So how do you figure it out? Which one's A and B and which one is C? So why do we say A and B and then which one is C? Because A and B are linked together. They both are two legs and they can be swapped around. So you can say leg A is leg B and you can say leg B is leg A and so on. But you can't swap that out as soon as we start the equation. And we will get to the equation shortly. So how do you figure it out? The A and B are normally straight and C is normally the slanted line in most of these. So that's how you figure it out. So as we learned, a right triangle has two legs, A and B, and a hypotenuse, C, and they're marked on the thing with the orange being the hypotenuse and the black being the legs. So the legs. In an equation in the Pythagorean theorem, you must know at least one of the two legs. Okay, so let's say you have 5 as leg A, and you have 10 as the hypotenuse, or C. You don't know what B is. That works, because you must have at least one of the two legs. If you have A and B, it works. If you have A and C, it works. If you have B and A, it works. If you have B and C, it works. If you have all three of them, it works. But if you have all three of them, there's a special thing to do to find if it's a right triangle or not. And we'll cover that towards the end of the video. But right now, let's just focus on the Pythagorean theorem. Well, I mean, that is the Pythagorean theorem, but the actuality of it. So the hypotenuse, it's squared equals both legs squared added up. Okay, so 5 squared plus b squared equals 10 squared in this scenario, because if you square everything, it's equal to the same thing. So if you square a and b, you get c, which is squared. So let me explain that to you. So in a right triangle, the Pythagorean theorem applies, stating that the square of the length of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the lengths of the other two sides. This relationship is fundamental in solving problems involving right triangles. And as you can see in this model, you can see a squared, b squared, and c squared. Anyways, let's get into the equation. It's a fundamental principle in geometry that relates to the sides of a right triangle. That's the Pythagorean theorem. It states that in a right triangle, the square of the length of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the length in the other two sides. That's the word form. And it can be written as an equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So, example 1, given a and b. Find the missing value. Basically, over here, this is like a question, and it's asking you to find the missing value, which is c. C in this case is missing. You have a is 5, b is 12, c is question mark. Use a squared plus b squared equals c squared to solve. So if you use a squared plus b squared plus c squared, you'll get this answer. So you can pause it here. I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's get into the answer. So basically, using this formula, you have to substitute all these values inside of these variables. And if you didn't get it this time, it's fine because this is your first time. But try solving example 2 and example 3, which will be next. So basically, you just substitute a into a. So a equals 5, we know that. So a squared, 5 squared. B equals 12, we know that. So b squared becomes 12 squared equals c squared. We don't know what c squared is, so we just leave it alone. So then what is 5 squared? 25. What is 12 squared? 144. Okay? So then if you get 25 and 144, next step is to add them up. Okay? So if you add them up, you get 169. So 169 equals c squared, or c squared equals 169. You can flip it around, it means the same thing. So now why do you have to square root it? Because square rooting is the opposite of squaring. Okay? So if you got the answer as c squared equals 169, it's not the answer, but you're still right. C squared does equals 169 in this example. You just have to simplify further by square rooting that 169 and square rooting the c squared. Because if you square root on one side, it also applies on the other side. So if you square root the c squared, they both cancel out. The squared and the square root cancel out, and you get c. If you square root the 169, it turns into 13, because 169 squared rooted is equal to 13. So c is equal to 13 in this scenario. So next, example 2. Find the missing value. If a equals 9, we don't know b, and c is equal to 15. Use the Pythagorean Theorem to solve this. Alright, I'll give you 3 seconds to pause and solve it, then I'll get back. 3, 2, 1, answer. Okay, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 9 squared plus b squared equals 15 squared if you substitute. So if you do that, you get 81 because 9 squared is 81. 15 squared is 225. B squared is equal to 225 minus 81. Well, how did that work? How did it just randomly change the equation? Well, if you minus b squared on both sides, well, you can't really do that, but if you minus 81 on both sides, you can do that, because if you subtract something on both sides, you can do whatever operation you want on both sides, basically. Like, you can square root on both sides, like we did in the last example. We're going to do it in this example, too. Or you could just subtract 81 on both sides. You could also subtract b squared on both sides, but that wouldn't make sense in this example, because we're trying to solve for b squared. So you subtract 81 on both sides. So b squared equals 225 minus 81. 225 minus 81 is 144. So 144 equals b squared, or b squared equals 144. And then you have to square root both of the sides again. So b squared and then that square rooted is equal to just b again. 144 square rooted is equal to 12. So 12 would be the answer for this problem. So we know that b is equal to 12 when a is 9 and c is 15. Example 3. Find the missing value. Okay? Yeah, we don't know a, but we know b and c. b is 6 and c is 10. And use a squared plus b squared equals c squared to solve as normal. I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Answer. Okay. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared plus 6 squared equals 10 squared. A squared plus 36 is equal to 100 if you square 6 and then square 10. Okay, that was Siri. But anyways, a squared equals 100 minus 36. Also, don't listen to Siri. But minus 30 is 70. That's why I said don't listen to Siri. But anyways, 100 minus 36 is equal to 64. And 640 equals a squared was a typo. So don't listen to that either. Don't listen to Siri or that. But anyways, if once you get 64, you have to square root that 64. So 64 squared is equal to 8. And that would be your answer for this missing value. Alright, this is the converse of the Pythagorean theorem, which means if you have a, b, and c. So basically, if the square of the length of the longest side of a triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides, then the triangle is a right triangle. First, determine the hypotenuse. Then substitute the values to solve. So the hypotenuse is always the biggest value. The hypotenuse right now is 39. And it's always the biggest value. So if you didn't have this triangle model to show you that 39 was hypotenuse, that's how you figure out which is which. Okay? A can be 15 or 36. Same with B. That's because both legs can be swapped. C must be the bigger value. In this case, 39. Okay? So 39 has to be C. And if we didn't have the triangle, that's how you know that that's the hypotenuse. Anyways, let's get into this equation. Let's solve this, alright? So the problem we're doing is 15, 36, and 39. I'm not going to tell you which one is A, B, and C because I just did. Basically, just use that formula to solve it, alright? And I didn't put an equal sign or an unequal sign in the middle of the space between the answer because we don't know if it's equal or not equal, okay? So let's say when we're finished solving this, we get 150 is equal to 150. That means, since they both are equal, that means it's a right triangle. Let's say you got 150 equals 160. Then it's not equal because you didn't get a right triangle. And that's not the answer, I'm just giving an example. So, yeah. Alright, I'll give you 3 seconds to pause it and solve it on your own. And I'll get back to you. 3, 2, 1. Answer. Alright, so given these, you just substitute them. Again, obviously, 15 squared plus 36 squared equals 39 squared. So then if you square 15, you get 225. If you square 1296, if you square root 1296, you get 36. If you square 36, you get 1296. And then that is equal to 39 squared, which is 51, or 1,521. So obviously not equal to 51. But 225 plus 1296 is equal to 1521. So just add them both. Add 225 and add 1296. Then you get 1521. So 1,521 is equal to 1,521. Since they both are equal, it's a right triangle. It's that simple. So that's everything you need to know about the Pythagorean Theorem. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.